But now again, put your attention on H3091. Now we're going to get into some explaining on full and effective spelling, and I am so excited to have this opportunity to explain this because I have seen a lot of division coming up in these last days. People are saying the most amazing things about Yahushua's name. They're blaspheming Yahushua's name as if it doesn't matter. They're not doing research, they're not praying, they're not fasting, they're not seeking Yahuwah, and they're saying a lot of things without even thinking or researching, and they can't take correction. You can't talk to these individuals because they know too much. You can't tell them anything because they know what they think they know, because they have those itching ears that are waiting for those little divisions and devices that come along so that they can branch off into what they see as a more narrow road. But actually what they're doing is they're being led astray, and they're leading other people astray. When we look at H3091, you see Yad Ha Wal Shin Wal Ayin, and you see Yad Ha Wal Shin Ayin. Again, this is a case of full and effective spelling in Hebrew. If you actually study biblical Hebrew, you will have heard these phrases before. But I want to show you an example of both occurring, just so you see that they do appear in the oldest Tanakh, the Aleppo Codex. You see the full form, and you see the defective form. Now, in these last days, there's an argument that has come up within the people who call the Father Yahuwah. They have begun to divide on what we should call the Son. Up until this point, the hardest thing that used to be to explain was the Yahu part in the name, because just about everybody who said some variation of the Son's name, they all said Shua as the ending. But in these last days, particular individuals have decided that no, the defective form, Shin Ayin, is the true name, and we should transliterate the letters, and that would be transliterated as not Yahushua, but Yahusha. So, you know, the first thing that I'm thinking when I'm seeing this information is these people overnight, a lot of them are coming out with this stuff. They're coming out and they're saying, oh, it's Yahushua because of this, it's Yahushua because of that. And I don't see any of them fasting or praying or taking any time away to just study and to find out what's really going on here. Because when you look it up in the Strong's Concordance, these two names are under one entry, and both spellings, the Strong says, is pronounced the exact same way. What I want to show you the difference is in the full spelling you have that extra wall in Shua. In the defective form, that wall is dropped. What takes place, however, is it is replaced with a kibbutz, which is a nukud, a vowel point. Okay, now I want to give you the whole analysis real quick about the full and effective spelling real quick. The main argument is that the full spelling, Yahushua, it only appears twice in the Masoretic text. Now this is true. In the Masoretic text, not in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because in the Dead Sea Scrolls I'm going to prove to you that the name of Yahushua appears way more times than what it appears in the Masoretic text. But the argument is the full spelling appears only twice. It must be in the Masoretic text. It just must be a scribal error. Whereas the defective form, it appears 216 times. And they're like, wow, 216 times? That's more. That must be it. There must have been a conspiracy to cover up the name. And then I mentioned full and defective spelling. There's people who are being very skeptical, I'm sure, at this point. And they're thinking, oh, he's talking about vowel points and stuff. Well, yes, I am talking about vowel points and stuff, because in videos before I have mentioned that we cannot use vowel points to try to figure out the name of Yahuwah, and this is true. However, vowel points are useful because the Masoretes used defective spellings, full and defective spellings, thousands of times. And what a full spelling is a spelling that contains all the vowels necessary for pronunciation. A defective spelling usually drops one or two of those letters in favor for vowel pointing, so that you can know how to say this. And again, this happens thousands of times. The first example that it happens in is, of course, Yahushua. But another example is King David, or Dawid. King Dawid's name is spelled fully Dalet Wal Yad Dalet. It is spelled defectively Dalet Wal Dalet, only 3 letters, and you'll notice the letter Yad is missing in the defective spelling. Okay? But every single time that Yad is missing, every time, not just some of the times, but every time, there is a Nakud symbol, the Kirek, which makes the E sound, just like the Yad does in Dawid. Okay? So, this is a case of full and defective spelling, and it happens in King David's name. It also happens in Yaakov's name, who is called Jacob. Yaakov's name is spelled fully Yad Ayin Kuf Wal Beit. It appears 5 times in the Masoretic text. It is also spelled Yad Ayin Kuf Beit. That's the defective form. You'll notice the wall, the same exact letter that is dropped in Yahushua's name, is dropped in Jacob's name. But nobody seems to know this when I call these people on the phone and talk to them. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who are promoting the name Yahushua, and they had little to no understanding at all about defective spellings. But it appears on the names of very well-known people all throughout the scriptures. So, even Jacob's name drops the letter Wal. And notice nobody is calling Jacob Yaqubah. Everybody knows that there's a vowel between the Kuf and the Beit, because they're all saying Yaqub. You also see this in Yehunathan's name. Yehunathan, his name, you see it spelled fully and effectively. The full version has a letter Ha, whereas the defective version, there is no letter Ha, and the Yad makes the Ya sound all by itself, so it's still Yehunathan. In the name Yabesh, you see Yabesh is spelled Yad Beit Shin, and it appears 20 times, versus Yad Beit Yad Shin, which appears 14 times. And here the Yad is dropped in favor for vowel pointing in the defective spelling. In another name, Yermoth, you find Yad Resh Yad Mem Wal Ta appears twice, and Yad Resh Mem Wal Ta appears 7 times. The letter Yad is dropped in favor for vowel pointing. In the word Ephod, which means a garment, is spelled Aleph Pei Wal Dalet 10 times, and this word drops the letter Wal, just like Yahushua's name. In the defective spelling, it is spelled Aleph Pei Dalet, and everywhere the Wal is missing, there is always a vowel marker to let you know that there was the letter there. The name Yahuzadak also drops the letter Ha, and when it drops the letter Ha, there is no vowel pointing there because the letter Yad makes the Ya sound. So fully it has a letter Ha. Defectively it lacks that, but it's still Yahuzadak. And there are thousands of other examples, as I said, because this happens over and over and over in the Masoretic text. If you actually study the Masoretic text, you would know that at the front or in the back of the various codexes of the Masoretic text, you will find something called the Masura, which is a list of all the things they changed and tampered and messed with, and there is a whole section on full and defective spellings. So just do some research and know this is just something they were doing. See, the vowel system had become much like their own alphabet. They were so used to using it that instead of writing a whole letter out, you know, they would just throw a dot there, let you know that, yeah, that letter should be there, but we're not spelling it that way. We're going to put it, you know, a Nakud symbol there. And another thing, I want to give you another example real quick about a word that drops a letter. You have the word Eloah, which means a mighty one. Now, when the plural form comes in, defective spelling usually takes hold on words when it becomes plural. And what you find is Elohim drops the Wal in favor of vowel pointing, which is the vowel point, the holum. So now you have some people saying Elohim instead of Elohim. But because, see, it comes from Eloah, so we know that the plural form would be Elohim. And the vowel point is there to let you know that, yes, even this is spelled defectively. So there's all these words, and the wall is dropped many times. All right? I'm not saying that it's a very good system, but I'm saying we have to work with what the scriptures actually show us. And if they want to go and use the Masoretic text to prove this name Yahushua, you got to look at the whole thing. You can't just take the pieces that satisfy your itching ears. Another thing I want to keep in mind about defective spelling is, remember the spelling Yad, Shin, Wal, Ayin? Well, if you remember the quote that I gave earlier, how Yah would always be Yahu, and we know that in Zechariah, the same man who's called Yeshua is called Yahushua. I believe that Yad, Shin, Wal, Ayin is Yahushua. That says Yahushua. Without vowel points, you have to go back, you have to think about this. Take yourself back thousands of years ago when the man Yahushua, the son of Yahuzadek, walked the face of the earth. Now, if everybody's calling him Yahushua, and even Prophet Zechariah writes his name out as Yahushua, and then someone comes along and you know what you know, if you're Hebrew, about full and defective spellings, and you see it spelled Yad, Shin, Wal, Ayin, why would you say Yeshua? Why wouldn't you still say Yahushua? So this variant that appears 30 times points us to Yahushua's name. Again, it's spelled Shin, Wal, Ayin. On the end, you notice that the wall is there in this variant, just like it is in the full form. Okay. So some of the things about this pronunciation, Yahushua, I've got to touch on because they're leading a lot of people astray with misinformation. The biggest claim is that the 2 times I said that the full spelling appears, that's just a scribal error. Now, if that's a scribal error, then what about the time where he's called Yeshua, which is Yahshua, and I said that it's also Yahushua? Why is it that the wall reappears? Why isn't he just called Yasha to make things more simple? Why is it that every time it's spelled defectively, the 216 times, why is it that it always has a kibbutz vowel point? Why is it that we have thousands of full and defective spellings, so many full and defective spellings within the Masoretic text that I don't even have the time to go through them all with you. I mean, we're talking about thousands of instances here. So it can't just be a scribal error. There's more to it. You can't just throw out 2 verses that have a spelling when we're talking about the son's name. You can't just throw that out and throw out all the other information. One of the claims that I've heard is, it's amazing how bold and brave these individuals are to make some of the claims that they make. One of the arguments is that Yahushua is some type of curse. Because if you look up Shin, Wal, Ayin in the Strong's Concordance, you actually find several entries all the way from H7768 to H7774. You find all these variations. They say that they're pronounced in different ways and stuff like that. But when you look it up, all of these words generally mean to cry out for salvation, for freedom, or it can mean liberation and wealth. Now, what I want you to keep in mind is the Strong's Concordance doesn't say that the name Yahushua comes from Shua. It says that it comes from Yasha. In the passive participle of Yasha, they insert a wall. That's how passive participles work in Hebrew grammar. They insert a wall, it becomes the passive participle. So, if it comes from Yasha, then it's the passive participle form of Yasha. So I still agree that the name Yahushua does come from the primitive root Yasha. But something you need to understand about Yasha is Yasha being a primitive root, it generally takes on additional letters. One variant that appears in the text is when you look up in a Strong's Concordance software and you look up Yasha, you'll see that it supposedly appears a couple hundred times. But when you actually begin to read each of the verses, you'll find instead of Yasha, generally you find the variants, one being Hushia, Ha, Wal, Shin, Yad, Ayin. So you find all these variants of Yasha, and you'll notice that Yasha generally, there is some type of vowel that's inserted between the Shin and the Ayin. That's the reason when I see Hoshia's name spelled Ha, Wal, Shin, Ayin, the way it's spelled in the Masoretic text, is vowel pointed to say Shia instead of Shah. And I believe because of the variant form of Yasha that appears very, very often Ha, Wa, Shin, Yod, Ayin, that his name is Hushia. Because that's how you say this variation of Yahshua.